Hi, everyone. Welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict Live.
All right, hello everybody. Well, we decided to launch this live stream to talk about the Iran nuclear deal that is still in the process in Vienna. So what do you think, Ross?
Well, we predicted what was going to happen, and you know what? That's exactly what did happen. There is no deal.
Well, you're absolutely correct. So we want to, as we said earlier, to update you, but also answer your questions that you may have. Well, indeed, the talk have not yielded the desired outcome. So everybody was saying, well, maybe Iran will agree to the terms, whatever. There is no way. That ain't going to happen. The reason being because Iran is saying, sure, we can go back to the JCPOA once the Americans lift all the sanctions that were imposed by the Trump administration.
And the chances of that happening don't look so good. And you know, there's enormous pressure on both sides of this. The current leader in Iran really wants to get a deal because his term is up this month.
That's correct. As a matter of fact, the Iranian presidential elections, which may be, I think, towards the end of May or the beginning of June. And the fear is that if a hardliner ascends to power, those guys, they won't even want to have any negotiations with the West whatsoever regarding the nuclear deal. And this is why all the parties involved, the P5+1, Germany, Russia, China, France, and the United States, all of them, and the UK, all of them wants to have the deal reached. But apparently, the United States is not willing to go the same route that's supposed to if they ever want to have this deal resolved. And what the American side are saying is, no, we can lift all the sanctions. But the sanctions that the United States is talking about are sanctions that are inconsistent with the 2015 nuclear deal. In other words, those sanctions have nothing to do with the nuclear Iran deal. And Iran is saying, no, we're not going to agree. And they're not going to agree to that. It's common sense. We, the Americans, broke the contract, and we don't expect, Iranians just to bow and accept our terms. I just don't see that happening with us.
The net effect of this is, with the sanctions and all the rest of this, that the United States seems to have lost a real power in this situation. Matter of fact, they were excluded from the direct talks. And we're seeing more and more the push to the east.
That's correct. But the optics of that didn't look good for the United States because the meeting was only between the P4, if you will, like France, Germany, China, and Russia. And the United States was in a separate room because the Iranians saying, we're not going to have a direct talks with the Americans.
Boy, is this different from 5-6 years ago.
It is.
The United States dictated everything. And now they're even excluded from the main hall.
Not anymore. And that tells you right now where the U.S. status is as far as how the world sees the United States.
And the entire world is watching this.
They are, because it is a big deal, especially if you take into consideration Iran and China just signed a comprehensive strategic partnership deal.
25 years, $400 billion, and a bank.
Exactly. And that is the key to what has not been reported, as we mentioned in one of our videos, that is the financial mechanisms by which Iran and China is going to trade, which means they're going to bypass the US dollar altogether. And that, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, I believe is going to open up other countries' eyes on the financial system that is dominated by the US dollar and saying, hey, maybe it's just time to dump the US dollar altogether.
Especially if there's sanctions against countries like Germany.
You're right. You're absolutely correct. And if that happens, Ross, that means the sanctions will become useless because they will have no effect whatsoever.
Exactly.
So, and this is where this deal, like we said last time when we talked about this the nuclear deal, We don't expect anything to happen. Now, Washington usually will spin it out differently by saying there are always progress towards achieving some compromise. I just don't see how the Iranians going to back down from that, because that is the core tenet of what this nuclear deal is all about. And all Iran is asking is, sure, we will go back to the original deal by cutting down, for example, the enrichment of uranium below 20%. We will do that only if the United States lifts all the sanctions imposed by the Trump administration in 2018. So, and we kind of don't expect the United States to do that. And that in itself put the Biden administration in a different position altogether, because we all remember that during the presidential elections, candidate Biden at the time was saying he will put the United States back into the nuclear deal and put the U.S. on a good footing with the global powers regarding the Iran nuclear deal. Now we're seeing...
It's not looking so good.
No, it's not. We're seeing him taking a different path altogether. The same argument was made about China. Because you remember when he was running for office, the argument was, no, we're going to have to enter into talks with the Chinese, and we talk about...
Where are the talks?
Yeah, and the tariffs still there. The U.S. did not lift the tariffs on the Chinese.
And even the meeting that did convene was all about bashing the Chinese for some charges of massacring their own people.
Human rights and all that.
And human rights. And we're going to do a show on that soon.
Yeah, because there's so much misinformation coming out regarding human rights abuses in China, whatever. I mean, come on.
Xinjiang and
yeah.
the Uyghurs.
And if we have to talk about human rights, how come we are not talking about human rights abuses in Yemen that is conducted using Western weapons? I mean, if we are to be fair,
right,
we're going to be fair to all parties. And that is exactly what we do in our show here, is we're going to provide objective assessments and unbiased information on facts based to the best of our knowledge.
Our whole goal is for you to have enough information to make up your own mind. And some of this information is hard to come by. What's that Chinese phrase that goes, tell a lie 3 times so people believe it's true?
Oh, if you hear it 3 times,
if you hear it 3 times,
you better believe it's true.
And we're certainly hearing a number of things that are very questionable 100 times.
That's correct.
And people are believing it.
Yeah.
And no information, no confirmation.
You're absolutely correct. And all this has to do with this massive agenda, if you will, from the West pushing toward. Once again, we're not advocating for China here. No, we don't do that.
Not at all.
It's just we have to report what is factual. And what's factual thus far is this human rights talks, all that, it's nonsense. So, and this is what we wanted to do with this live stream here, is to provide you an update, and also we want to answer any questions you may have.
So if you've got some really compelling questions, let's have them.
Yeah, let's answer some of your questions. Come on, send us one.
The harder the better.
The harder the better, you're right. Let's see one question here. Yeah, one of the questions here has to do with, it says basically China has entered Iran. They are running to also have some of the cake, but it's too late. You know, I couldn't agree more. It's because the West, including the United States, are seeing where this is going. This partnership between Iran and China is going to have far dimensions that goes beyond the Middle East geopolitically, but also it will have a major economic impact onto how global trade and how global economy is going to be conducted. And as we said in our last video, Ross, when we talked about the financial sector as part of this deal, China and Iran decides to establish their own banks, which means what? It means one thing. We're going to create our own currency by which we can trade. That means dump the entire dollar. We don't have to worry about that anymore. And if Iran and China conducts their business that way, other countries are going to follow suit.
What we know is that China has relationships with practically every other country in the Middle East. And if they've got a solid bank with all this money, what does it mean in terms of using the digital yuan or whatever they're calling it to do business with all these other Middle Eastern countries.
Yeah, so far they are using the RMB, the digital currency that was launched by the Chinese. And yes, you're absolutely correct, Ross. China's policy towards dealing with other countries, it's always in neutrality. In other words, they don't favor one over another. As we said last time, they can do business with Iran and they can do business with Turkey. They don't care.
You know, we were reading one foreign source that said that China is quickly becoming the power broker in the Middle East. And it could actually lead to a lot of agreements between the Middle Eastern countries that are currently in conflict.
And there are a lot of conflicts in the Middle East. It is a powder
fingers and toes to count them all.
Yeah, it is a powder gig in the Middle East waiting to explode. And
Right.
just because the tensions that exist in the Middle East. So just to answer back this first question here is the idea that indeed the United States' concern is that they might be left behind on one specific aspect, which is the financial aspect. Because as you all know, as all of you know, most of the transactions around the world are conducted in the US currency. So let's say another question here. And the question is, if the dollar falls, will there be some international currency to replace it? That is a great question. Of course, we're going to just provide a quick answer to it. Well, it will be eventually at some point, another currency will have to replace that. But so far, just for all of you guys to understand is replacing a currency, it doesn't happen overnight. You know, it's a long process. There's a lot of stuff that has to be renegotiated among countries who trade. But the key we need to understand is, given how much the United States printing of money they're doing, the dollar is getting weaker. So the countries that they don't want to use the dollar anymore, which some of them now are moving into that direction by dumping the dollar is going to become irrelevant down the road. Because countries will say, why bother with the dollar anymore? And as you all know, for example, the oil transactions regarding the energy, as we call petrodollar, is done in the dollar. So China and Iran, once now this agreement enter into effect, they don't need to do that in a dollar. They're going to do it in the Chinese currency, the yuan. So the answer is yes, it will be replaced eventually. Next question is, can this deal have a very long-term effect in South America, especially Brazil and my country, Argentina? Very interesting question.
Very interesting.
Because we're going to do a show, our next, we're going to release it soon. We're going to do about China's investments in Latin America and why Latin America is going now with China instead of thinking about the United States. There is one thing you need to understand about Argentina, for example, with their debt that they end up having to sort of they're stuck right now because of the IMF loans that's been given to Argentina, and Argentina couldn't pay that. So the way I see it, and I'm sure Ross shared the same opinion with me, is that China's investments in Latin America makes perfect sense for Latin American countries because they're saying, we're done with America, with the United States, that is, given the US history in Latin America. I do foresee large infrastructure projects financed by China in Latin America, but also because of another reason also. Latin America is going to play a role into the Belt and Road Initiative. So that makes perfect sense.
I have a cousin who was chairman of Mellon Bank, and he worked for the Federal Reserve. And he was the most clear-headed person I ever met. He said, when you look at the criteria for a loan, it is absolutely straightforward. Do they have the collateral? And then the discussion went to, well, what about all these loans that investments that China's making into Latin America? He said, these are unfavorable odds. These are not the kinds of loans that, say, the United States or the international banking system wants to invest in because they're risky. The Chinese say we'll take the risk, and they're going to be some win and some lose. But the countries in Latin America are cash hungry, and they want infrastructure projects. They want a better life, and the Chinese are willing to take the risk.
Yeah. Well,
We're
there's
going to do a deep dive into this to really explain
Yeah,
it in
we-
detail.
Yeah, we are. Because there's the argument, just to follow up on this question quickly here, there is the argument that some are saying, well, no, Chinese are putting countries into debt. Okay, what about the World Bank? What about the IMF, the International Monetary Funds? So it's the same arguments, except that China's saying, sure, we will invest, as Ross mentioned, we'll take a risk with you. And this is what I see, especially the project for China in Ecuador, in Chile, and Argentina. So, next question. Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Okay, Jean Laveye, I hope I pronounced the name correctly. I want to say thank you for finding our channel, and we look forward to you subscribing to it. Let's say the next question. Okay, the next question is, okay, the West benefits from the underdevelopment of other regions. Biden, in his stage press conference, made it clear other countries catching is wrong. Does the West realize that the past is not the future? Well, I couldn't agree more. You kind of hit the nail on the head. I mean, here is one thing that everybody needs to understand, is that the West, and the United States included, are having a hard time accepting the changes in the global landscape with the rise of China at the head of that shift or that change. And yes, we can be going back to the past because countries have now thinking differently. China can provide them the opportunity of the building of infrastructure. You just think, I mean, we look at it here in the United States with the conversation that's taking place right now regarding the $2.3 trillion infrastructure bill.
Right.
You know, what I need most Americans to understand is only 5% of that $2.3 trillion going to go to infrastructure. Where's the rest is going? But if we are to talk about infrastructure, why aren't we building, for example, speed trains?
Right.
In the US that can connect New York to LA? Why aren't we building larger airports? Why aren't we building different type of infrastructure that can benefit the? But because the problem here with the United States government does not do cost-benefit analysis. Because the United States, when it spends on a project, it's not its own money, it's taxpayers' money. So it won't matter whether the project succeeds or not. This is what most Americans do not understand. So thank you for that question. Now, let's say the next question here from YC. Okay, I'm going to read it. Will it be better to have a basket of currencies rather a single one acting as a global currency to prevent one country to hijack global trade? I couldn't agree more with you. I couldn't agree with you more with you because the dynamics of global affairs and global economy have changed. Yes, in the global currency baskets, used to be, I don't know if you remember, back then in Europe, when I used to go back at the same time, we used to have the German mark, the French franc, the French Swiss, the Swiss francs, and all that. So currencies had different ones, and some of them were part of the international monetary system. The Chinese one, by the way, I believe just was added to the international currency back in 2015, if I'm not mistaken. But you're absolutely correct into that assessment that, yeah, this is where the dominance and the strength of the US dollar comes in. It's because there is only the global trade is conducted in the US currency. And that is about to change soon. And this is something Washington is having a hard time accepting, because once the Chinese figure out with the digital one that becomes the global currency for trade, that is, there will be too late for the US to do anything, let alone the debt we are going into. It's massive and so forth. So
it looks like this is inevitable. There's no way to stop it. It's too late.
It is too late because, you know, it's just how things are moving into that direction. So we will be seeing that. So, here is another question from Tariq. Is there any possibility that American foreign policy establishment and neocons understand that to be a thug is not an answer. that was a good one. That was a good one, Tariq. That was a good one. So, I mean, you hit
the kindred spirit. I'll tell you.
Yeah, I must admit. I couldn't agree more. Yeah, the problem with American foreign policy, as we said last time, there is no strategy. There is no direction. So we, in America, we are reacting to events rather than having a cohesive, comprehensive strategy. I'm just going to share a quick story here regarding foreign policy. I remember before the invasion of Iraq, I argued, I was at the time was still in Washington, D.C., and I argued against the invasion. The reason being because the invasion was going to open up a can of worms that the U.S. would not be able to close.
And that's exactly what happened.
And the answer I got back, you know what was the answer was? It was, oh no, David, it's going to be a quick walk. We're going to go and liberate Baghdad and get out.
Yeah, right.
I said, listen, if you go in, you're not coming back out of Iraq maybe for 2 decades or even 3 decades or so.
At what cost?
At what cost?
$1 trillion now.
Let alone what this is going to do to the Iraqi society. Iraq, that I happen to read about, this is where the civilization of the Arab world started.
Yeah.
This is where the grammatical rules of the Arabic language started in Iraq.
And Persia.
Persia also. Christians used to live in Iraq in peace.
Yeah.
Not anymore. So I can see your point, Tariq, that indeed, because American foreign policy has no cohesive strategy. And as I said, we're just reacting to events. Look no further than what's taking place right now against Iran, and look no further than what's taking place right now vis-a-vis Taiwan and China.
We're going to do a show on
We're going to do that one too. So I hope this answered your question, Tariq. Next question is from Jean. Do you think it's better to put my China travel plan on ice from Canada? It is a tough one. And here is why. Because Canada was dumb, I'm going to use the term, was dumb enough to follow blindly what the US was asking of it to arrest the daughter of the Huawei founder.
Right.
Because the US didn't tell the Canadians that they wanted to use the Huawei daughter as a bargaining chip during the US-China talks. And now Canada will have to pay. It is paying the price. It's not will have. It is paying the price. You know, as a citizen, usually government doesn't have to worry much about, but it will not be a wise thing for you now to go to Canada till this issue is resolved. So, next question from Make-A-Wish. Okay. Currently, among Latin American countries, Venezuela, Cuba, and Bolivia are a lot more closer to China than US. Which other Latin country in the future do you think it can become closer to China than US? Well, the quick answer, I've been in Bolivia, I've been in Latin America. The quicker question that I see moving forward is Chile. Ecuador to a degree also, but Chile will be the one. Panama is another one because China is investing heavily in the infrastructure of Panama. So basically, the way I read this, if I am to analyze it, all it indicating is Latin America was fed up with the Americans, especially after what happened with what's his name, the opposition guy, Juan Guaido in Venezuela, which was a joke, by the way. It's kind of, yeah, that's the country that I see next. It will be Chile and Panama. Those are the two countries where China is going to be investing heavily. No.
By the way, a position is that where there's terrific internal turmoil inside a Latin American country, the Chinese are typically staying away from it because it's a bad investment.
That's correct, and they didn't get involved. And I remember when
they didn't get involved, exactly.
When I wrote my last book, I devoted a section about the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, in Latin America, starting in the 70s. So it's not a pretty history, shall we say. It's because we end up supporting dictators. We end up doing things that we say, well, we stand against. well, how can you say one thing and do another? That's what we call in English language double standard. And usually when you conduct yourself from a foreign policy perspective that way, you will have no credibility. So, next question. There's a question from Sans-Soleil. Okay, how do you think the UK, Canada, and Israel will judge their American alliance and their economic ties to China? Wow, that is
how loaded a question is that?
It is a loaded one, because this one has on too many fronts very interesting questions. And by the way, this kind of questions is what we address in our private forum with some of our members, because there is a community involved in all these discussions. But I will answer you briefly on this one here. It has to do with the idea of you take, for example, Israel now and Saudi Arabia getting involved in the Iran nuclear deal talks. You know, they have no place into these negotiations in first place, because the deal was made between P5, the permanent members of the UN Security Council, Germany, and of course Iran.
Yes.
So to how they're gonna see it, to the Chinese, it won't matter. They kind of like, we can do business with you and we can do business with the other person. That's the way they approach it. So China strikes me as very pragmatic when it comes down to foreign policy. They will know where to draw the line as far as not to cross an entity or another country interest and so forth. So next question. Okay, make a wish. USA won't let Panama get more closer to China than US is, in my opinion, because of Panama Canal. Maybe there will be a coup if that happens. I see your point. It won't go to that point of a coup, because China will approach it just from a business, from economic aspects. So it becomes now, it behoves the Panamanian leaders to decide what they want for their own country, what they want for their own citizens. Because this issue of the poverty in Latin America or whatever, it can be worked out if there are the right strategies and policies. And usually America got involved in Latin America for the wrong reasons. So that is basically where I do see this one. So it won't be a coup. I don't expect a coup, but I will expect that the US will exert some influence from behind the scenes, like what happened with Venezuela. Unfortunately, it's not going to succeed. So because Latin America is now, China has established some sort of foothold right here in the Western Hemisphere, and Latin America is going to see the opportunity for that. So one more questions, because we're going to have to go. One more questions. Who's this person's going to, actually, there is a question right here from Ariel. Thank you for the question, by the way, I appreciate it. Is the Arabian nuclear program a reality or merely a mirage? Well, actually, interesting question, Ariel. Saudis wanted to strike a deal with the United States regarding the share of the nuclear technology. As a matter of fact, the United States did agree to allow American firms to do business with the Saudis regarding the nuclear aspects of it. It concerns me personally, big time. The reason being, and I'm going to say it the way it is without sugarcoating it, I will not trust the Saudis with having their hands on the nuclear button. Straightforward. We all remember 9/11. And there is a book out there that I wrote about this topic. If you really want to read it, it's called Beneath the Veil, Fall of the House of Saud. It will be a very interesting read if you are interested in this. So as far as the nuclear, no, because there will be other forces inside Washington that would say, remember 9/11? So can you imagine if another event like that, this time with a nuclear device? Yeah, we can just see. So
the question is, where are they going to aim it if they get it?
Well, they say we are their allies, and yet what kind of ally would conduct 9/11?
Right.
So anyway, well, before we leave, we wanted to let you know that we do have a membership for where we can meet every, I think, what was it?
Every 2 weeks.
2 weeks. We're going to have a video call where we can have private conversations and answer specific questions, and especially for those who are interested in wanting to know about the link of geopolitics and economics, because there are major shifts coming down the pipe that you might want to know. We truly enjoyed having this session with you. See you guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye now.